Debate is adjourned and the bill is referred to the House Committee.
On how
Members' motion with no legislative effect. Honorable LUK Chung-hung will move a motion on importing electricity from the mainland to stabilize electricity tariffs in Hong Kong. Two members will move amendments to the motion. This council will proceed to a joint debate on the motion and the amendments. Later, I will first call upon Honorable LUK Chung-hung to speak and move the motion. Then I will call upon Honorable Andrew Lam and Dr. Honorable Hoey Simon Lee to speak in sequence, but they may not move the amendments at this stage. The joint debate now begins. Members who wish to speak, please press the request to speak button. I now call upon Honorable LUK Chung-hung to speak and move the motion. President, I move that the motion as printed on the agenda be passed. Importing electricity from the mainland to stabilize electricity tariffs in Hong Kong. To the general public and the SMEs, the greatest pressure comes not just from the high land prices, but also the high tariff rates. Early this year, both the CLP as well as the HEC have asked for tariff increases, 19.8% and 45.6% being the cumulative rates of increase. And recently, we have got two major power outages. Yuen Long, Tuen Mun, Tin Shui Wai suffered. And then on the Hong Kong Island, there was also an outage. But then they were not punished. For the HEC, they were given an extra bonus as a result of the incentive scheme. It has brought about public outrage. Well, we are still recovering from the economic downturn. They were allowed to have a permitted rate of return of 8%, and then the operational risk, that is the fuel prices, will be 100% passed on to the consumers as a result of the fuel cross-charge adjustment mechanism. So they were guaranteed 8% rate of increase. For the scheme of control agreement, in fact, it is a guaranteed profit agreement. They have natural monopoly. Today, we must break the monopoly. We must break the vested interest. That's the reason why I'm moving this motion. To have a breakthrough, we have to think outside of the box. The solution lies with getting more of our electricity from the mainland. As we all know that the basic tariff rate will be based on 8% of the average fixed assets. By reducing the purchase from the mainland and by investing more in the fixed assets, then they will be allowed to make more money. In fact, it is getting more and more stable when it comes to the electricity supply on the mainland. In fact, it is 60 to 70 cents of renminbi per unit of university on the mainland. Take Macau as an example. 90% of the power comes from the mainland. Irrespective of the rises in the international fuel prices, on average they pay $1.3 for a unit of electricity. For Tseung Kwan O Area 132, I know strategic electricity facilities will be built so that we can get power from the mainland and supply the power to the new territories. But it will only be 2035 that will get it. I think the government should be more aggressive and ambitious. I think we should make sure that before 2025, we should have a reserve grid and we should get more power from the Daya Bay. We should, as much as possible, get more power from, more electricity supply from the mainland. Well, take the China Southern Power Grid as an example. Non-fossil fuel accounts for 52% of their fuel mix. I think we should have more zero carbon energy from the mainland. We can cut down on our carbon emission and we can achieve the zero carbon emission target earlier. I think we should look at the overall picture and we want to be flexible in terms of electricity supply and stabilization of the prices. Should we only consider importation of zero carbon energy? I think there should be a more in-depth study within the community. In opening up the grid, I think the SCA is not a franchise. It is not a monopoly. For NDAs, I think we should introduce a third-party access. Like in the Northern Metropolis Development Strategy, I know that it is said that for the Shenzhen, Hong Kong Innovation Park. We have got the Sentient Technopole. I think we will be having innovation technology developments. I think they need a stable, reliable, and cheap supply of power. It is going to be a new development area. It is subject to new planning. It is just separated from Shenzhen by the Shenzhen River. I think we can consider getting electricity from the other side. And I don't think we should confine ourselves to the two existing suppliers. I think the administration must work hard here. There should be the introduction of competitors. We should break the monopoly, and we should take back the power to modify the SCA. We shouldn't be subject to the pressure of the power companies. We shouldn't be vulnerable. In the long term, we should lower the permitted rates of return. 8% after profits, that's too much. And together with the performance incentives for the CLP, they are getting as much as 8.3% as the rate of return and 8.15% for the HEC. The economy is still performing poorly. It is no way that we should bear with the high energy costs. Now, we have got a very low interest rate. Where can you get business that you're guaranteed 8% of profits? The excessive levels of profits means that the power companies would be too aggressive in investing in fixed assets, and they would not be interested in containing their cost of operation. And that's the reason behind the rising tariff rates. We should also look at the performance incentive penalty mechanism. I think all the targets are supposed to be the basic requirements we expect of the power companies. So what happens is that if they are not up to it, they should be penalized instead of doing it the other way around. They're supposed to resume their power supply within 65 minutes after an outage. They delivered it, and yet they were awarded with incentives for that purpose. This is not right. I think all the requirements are basic expectations. I think the incentives that they get should be channeled back to the vulnerable groups of citizens or to energy saving incentives. And then for us to better monitor the power companies as public utilities, they should enhance the transparency. As much as possible, they should tell us about their bulk energy purchases, the interest cost of lending and financing, so that we know that they will bear in mind the interests of their clients, and we can avoid having associated transactions. Say, for example, for the offshore liquefied natural gas terminal, it will be commissioned soon, within the year. Recently, we know that there has been an agreement with Russia, the largest gas supplier in the world. Once we have got the offshore terminal, can we not consider getting the gas supply from Russia so as to lower the cost of fuel? Finally, I think we are all for stable power supply as well as environmental performance, but they shouldn't be regarded as excuses to overly protective of the power companies. The government should take the initiatives to make sure that there will be better monitoring. It is time for us to have the interim review of the SCAs. I look forward to the available comments and suggestions of colleagues. I'll urge members consider endorsing my motion so that the motion will be passed, and then the administration will be given strong support to modify the SCA and come up with a better interim review outcome. So I spoke.
Now propose the question to you that Mr. LUK Chung-hung's motion be passed. Mr. Andrew Lam. Mr. President, first of all, I thank Mr. Michael Luk for moving the motion on importing electricity from mainland to stabilize electricity tariffs in Hong Kong. This motion, together with the two amendments, urge the government to continue to improve the electricity supply structure in Hong Kong to stabilize electricity tariffs. We should offer our input from various perspectives so that we have a full discussion of the matter. we should not go for the easy option. We don't have sufficient natural resources. It is necessary for us to import electricity. However, we must not just open up our doors because we have the dual carbon goals of the country. Hong Kong should take the lead and import zero carbon energy. Safety is as important as protecting the environment. We must impose heavy penalties on the incidents on the electric companies in relation to the power outage incidents. We need to consider opening up the electricity market without compromising safety. One option worthy of our consideration is to strive for the Central Authority's support for the setting up of dedicated transmission lines from the mainland. We need to strike a balance between safety and reasonable pricing. We should not, just like we should not import seafood from Fukushima. For electricity tariffs in Hong Kong, basically, there is the fuel clause charge and the basic tariff. In recent years, because of geopolitical tensions around the world, the fuel charges have continued to be on the rise. The FCC, the fuel clause charge, could no longer provide us with a guarantee. The CLP is able to lower the extent of the tariff hike because 1/3 of the power supply comes from Daya Bay. We should restructure the system so that we can offer more reasonable levels. However, we should also consider the relationship between the permitted rate of return and the average net fixed assets. The permitted rate of return in the scheme of control agreements is now set at 8% of the ANFA. Now, if we lower the permitted rate of return to 7%, then with increase in ANFA, we will still need to pay more in terms of electricity tariffs. There is a need for the government to control the capital investment of the two power companies to suppress the growth of the tariffs. For example, even if there is no limit on the capital investment, even if we lower the permitted rate of return to 2%, we still should not accept it. Say, for that Daya Bay nuclear plant, we should not allow CLP to make capital investments. We should only allow the CLP to purchase energy from the station, and by doing so, we can compress the growth of the two power companies' investments on fixed assets and achieve stabilization of tariffs. The government supports the issuance of green bonds, which can promote investment in power generation. This can also help lower the capital investment of the two companies. This can also help promote environmental protection in the Greater Bay Area. Now, in the midterm review of the scheme of control agreements, the government should consider the reviewing the different components instead of restructuring the whole agreement. The two power companies should bear in mind the social corporate responsibilities as public utility companies. They should help to stabilize electricity tariffs. I'm sure that they will be able to join hands with the SMEs and the general public to weather the storm. I believe we share the same goals and the same interests in terms of review of agreements with public utility companies. The government should not undermine the commercial bargaining power of the power companies because the public interests will also be undermined. Your time is up. Please stop. Dr. Hoey Simon Lee. Mr. President, members, in relation to Mr. Michael Luk's motion debate on importing electricity from the mainland to stabilize electricity tariffs in Hong Kong, I support this motion. I also have 3 points to make. First, the scheme of control agreements allowed the two power companies to earn a permitted rate of return of 8%, equivalent to 8% of the average net fixed assets, ANFA. This must be lowered. This is also the core of the original motion. The 8% should be reviewed. This is clear. We should give full consideration to the fact that the nature of the business of the two power companies is to offer public utility services to the livelihood. The market principles should be upheld, and the new principles on reining in the permitted rate of return should be introduced to safeguard public interests. At the moment, these two power companies are able to enjoy the guaranteed rate of return by way of capital investment. We should be able to monitor the operating costs and the capital investments. Like Mr. Michael Luk said, in terms of tendering the procurement of raw materials, staff salaries, so on and so forth, there should be transparency in all these matters. They should be subject to public scrutiny. Of course, the government is doing its job as the watchdog, but it is far from sufficient. The two power companies should also proactively show proof that they are in compliance with the requirements on controlling operating costs. They should strive to lower costs on their own initiative. For example, in terms of energy generation efficiency, the facilities of the two power companies fall way behind those in other countries. In the future, we should make way for a reform of the electricity markets in Hong Kong. In terms of distribution, substations, the power grids, and the microgrids, they will form the major components of the electricity supply in Hong Kong. For example, in building electricity facilities in new development areas, we need to make sure that new entrants will be able to take part in the competition so as to break the natural monopoly, which can affect people's livelihood with expensive tariffs. The government should set standards for microgrids, the storage facilities, to allow greater power grid access. Forward-looking planning should be put in place to encourage competition so that we can open up the electricity market in Hong Kong and, in the end of the day, provide stable, advanced, and competitive power supply services. I support Mr. Michael Luk's original motion, and I also support further importing electricity from the mainland to stabilize electricity tariffs in Hong Kong. We should also start a study on power grid access and separate the energy supply and the grid for the purpose of future development.
Secretary for Environment and Ecology. President, I'm grateful to Honorable LUK Chung-hung for moving this motion on importing electricity from the mainland and to stabilize the electricity tariffs in Hong Kong. I also thank Mr. Andrew Lam and Mr. Hoey Lee for moving the amendments. I'm making a general consolidated response, and then I will listen to members' views and provide further comments. The China Light and Power and the Castle Peak Power Company, as well as Hong Kong Electric and Hong Kong Electric Investment Company Limited, have signed scheme of control agreements with the administration. They took effect respectively on the 1st of October 2018 and the 1st of January 2019. According to the SCAs, the responsibility of the power companies and the permitted returns are set out, as well as providing for the administration to monitor the power companies and related corporate affairs. The power company have to provide Hong Kong with the power and necessary facilities. They have to provide them, operate them, and maintain them, and to make sure that they have a high efficient power supply to meet the needs of the citizens. And they have to also ensure reliability. The performance, efficiency, and customer service should be maintained at a high quality level. And they should provide the most reasonable, lowest tariff. And it should also improve its environmental performance. The SCAs will last for 15 years, so they would expire in 2033. And both the administration and the power companies have the right to amend any parts of the SCAs in the year ending the 31st of December 2023. Any amendments should be agreed by the administration and the power companies before implementation. And we are now conducting an interim review with the power companies over the SCAs. A preparation is being done. We have earlier consulted relevant stakeholders, including experts, academics, green groups, chambers of commerce, and think tanks, and we have also consulted the environmental affairs panel of the Ecology regarding the midterm review of the SCAs. Members of the panel make many valuable comments, including lowering the permitted returns, introduction of a sharing of energy cost mechanism in terms of energy crisis, and introduce a punitive system along the line for the MTR-CL. And also to improve the reward and penalty mechanism, as well as to enhance the transparency of tariff calculation and financial information of the power companies. We have an open mind about the midterm review. We have not drawn any specific boundary limiting the review scope. According to the views, we would consider views such as lowering the permitted returns, asking the power company to share the fuel costs, and review the reward and penalty mechanism, as well as increasing the penalty for stoppages. After the review is conducted, we will report the results to this council later. As for the opening up the power company and importation of mainland electricity, as well, we have been preparing for regional cooperation in this regard to stabilize power tariffs and also to ensure the energy safety and get more clean energy. Nuclear energy is zero carbon energy, which is matured in the market, and the price and tariff is more stable compared with the other forms of energy. With the drastic increase in energy costs, more and more economies have regarded nuclear energy as a reliable and dependable energy source. At present, the Diabab Bay nuclear power station provide about 27% of our energy fuel mix. So it would serve a certain stabilization functions. And according to the Hong Kong Climate Action Plan 2050, we are going to work with the company in achieving zero carbon emission and regional cooperation. We will explore more investment in zero carbon items. We would also consider introducing more power suppliers. We understand people's concern. We would ask the two power companies to show their social responsibility and tie over the difficulties with the community. And during the review, we will specifically ask the power companies to lower the tariffs using every possible means. So they have agreed to devote funds for a stabilization fund so that they would be able to reduce the impact of fuel costs. Also, the Financial Secretary in the 2023-24 financial budget announced a subsidy of $50 for all qualified users. And in the next round, there will be a 1,000 subsidy. I'll listen to members' comments carefully and respond later. Thank you.
Mr. Chen Xiu-hung, thank you, Madam Deputy. I need to declare interest I am a senior consultant employed by the CLP. I'd like to speak on the motion debate on importing electricity from the mainland to stabilize electricity tariffs in Hong Kong. I will stay objective in order to avoid any conflict of interest, I'm going to abstain from voting at the end of the motion debate. In order to achieve carbon neutrality in Hong Kong by 2050, the key is whether we can use zero carbon energy to replace the coal-fired power generation currently used. There are technologies involved. There are also challenges and opportunities in the process. For example, in terms of upgrading and transformation of the mode of power generation, we need to forge consensus in the community. In recent years, fuel costs have escalated because of geopolitical tension in the world, and as a result, there is a lot of attention on the fare hike. It is reasonable reading the title of this debate. However, in order to have sustainable development in society, we need to ensure electricity supply is stable, reliable, and that it also protects the environment. There are three major principles. Hong Kong is a densely populated, built-up city with a lot of skyscrapers. Now, comparing to New York and Singapore, we have 3 times more skyscrapers than the other cities. We have 1/3 of the population living and working in these skyscrapers. We also have some 66,000 lifts and escalators, some 6 million users on a daily basis. So it is important to ensure safe and reliable electricity supply. Timely infrastructural investment and capital investment is key. We do not have natural resources to generate power in Hong Kong. We rely on the import of raw materials for power generation, the pricing of which is affected by the global prices. This is basically pegged to commodity prices. Usually, there will be negotiations taken forward by power companies so as to achieve the most reasonable pricing in the short, medium, long term. The power companies will also tap new sources to lower the risk and to enhance the bargaining power. For example, the offshore LNG receiving facility is good, or the LNG terminal is a good example. Through a contractual arrangement in the long term, we can have a competitive price for procuring the energy we need. Now, with geopolitical tensions in recent years, since the second half of 2020, fuel costs have continued to escalate. In Singapore, London, and New York, the bills have continued to increase from 33 to 99% of increase, far exceeding the CLP's proposed hikes. We should thank the company for their efforts in procuring reasonably priced energy. It is also important to consider the protection of the environment. We have a Daya Bay nuclear power station. We have the dedicated generation and transmission facilities for Hong Kong. This is a good example, but we're importing electricity on a small scale. It accounts for 20% of the overall demand. And according to the Secretary, we will be increasing zero carbon energy supply in Hong Kong, and that means substantially increasing the percentage of power supply from Daya Bay and other sources. Over the years, the scheme of control agreements have provided a framework that facilitates investment. On the one hand, we can have a safe, reliable power supply, and we can also protect the environment so that we can achieve the 3 major principles for achieving carbon neutrality by 2050.
Carmen Ken. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I'm grateful to Michael Luk for moving this motion so that we can have a debate which is close to the heart of the people of Hong Kong. For this livelihood issue, I've got 4 points to make. First of all, opening up the market. Second, reviewing the permitted rate of return mechanism. Look at the incentive penalty mechanism. And fourthly, enhancing transparency. The Competition Commission has said that there is a natural monopoly in the electricity market. As early as 2015, there was a report saying that we should look at the duration for reviewing the SCA and introducing competition. The Bureau has said that overseas experience shows that opening up the market may not always automatically bring down the prices. Overseas experience may not apply here, where Hong Kong enjoys the advantage of one country, two systems. At this moment in time, we should emphasize regional cooperation to stabilize the prices and make sure that we have a safe and reliable supply. Having more zero carbon energy, in other words, nuclear energy and renewable energy from the mainland should increase. This is important. We need to pay attention to this. For the HEC, it hasn't got any interconnection with the mainland grid. And for the CLP, after 2025, the capacity will be enhanced in relation to the interconnection with the mainland facilities. For Chuan Kun O Area 132, we must make sure that HEC can enhance its capacity to get electricity from the mainland, and this can drive down the prices. The Bureau has said that it has got an open mind for the interim review. No parameters have been set. Say, for example, negotiating about the lowering of the permitted rate of return. Of course, it is subject to mutual agreement. I hope the companies will also be open-minded by considering their social corporate responsibility. We should consider the fixed asset growth they need for RE, and we should also improve the calculation formula. We can encourage their investment in RE, and we can also avoid passing all the costs to the consumers. I think that's what I said about the conflicts within the formula. When there is an energy crisis, the companies should share their fuel risk instead of passing it fully to the consumers. They should also discharge their social corporate responsibility. We are having the five-yearly interim review. Currently, for the HEC, it has only got natural gas as well as coal as the fuel. We should explore more sources of fuel. The CLP and the HEC have got different tariff rates. We should overcome the disparity. I think the government should set up a company to procure electricity. There should be an agreement. That procurement company should get the electricity and then supply it to the citizens of Hong Kong, so you can unify the tariffs. I think the government should be proactive, and I don't think it's a matter of subsidizing or cross-subsidization. Now, for the incentive penalty mechanism, I think part of it is outdated. For the supply restoration, if it is restored within 65 minutes after an outage, there's no penalty. In fact, there will be an incentive award of 0.015%. It is most unreasonable. This should be re-examined. The incentive penalty mechanism should make sure that it is only when it is a case of unforeseeable circumstances that is and that they have restored it as soon as possible, then they will be given the incentive. I think there should be information booklets to shed light on their operation. But what about cost of operation? What about the interest costs, etc.? Such is absent from the information booklets. The excuse being commercial secrets. I think the Competition Commission has given a good advice. There should be a new setup to monitor the performance. So while we ensure there is a stable supply, we can also benefit the citizens. It is a very urgent issue. I hope that we can get a good policy that benefits the public. Thank you. Dr. Lo Wai Guo. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I'm grateful to Mr. Michael Luk for moving the motion and the other two members for proposing the amendments. Hong Kong is a metropolitan city and IFC. We must have a stable supply of power to ensure that we have economic development. We have got two private companies, namely CLP and HGC, supplying electricity to us. The role of the government is that of signing a scheme of control agreement with the two power companies respectively. For the existing SCA, it was signed in 2017, covering the period from 2018 to 2033. Safety, reliability, reasonable prices, environmental performance are the four major yardsticks to measure the performance. We will project the fuel costs, the tariff rates, and then the EXCO's approval is needed. The rate of increase of the tariffs would require prior government approval. It is a capital-intensive business. The SCA means that the two companies know that they have certainty in the investment environment. Therefore, their performance or their rate of return is linked to their fixed assets. It has been working well. When compared with other countries, our prices, customer service, as well as reliability and stability, we have been performing very well. Madam Deputy, in recent years, international fuel prices have gone up. Our tariff rates have also surged. It is adding pressure to the business as well as the population. There is a school of thought that we should introduce competition. This is not the first time we have this idea for the market. In the year 2015, in March, there was a public consultation about the future of our market. Most people thought that we shouldn't just introduce competition for the sake of more choices. Reliability and stability would be most important instead. And introduction of competition may not always drive down the prices. And then it is believed that the approval system was appropriate. Fuel costs do fluctuate beyond the control of the power companies, but then they should explore more sources of supply of fuel. They should also enhance the transparency of the fuel cost data. I think such are more preferable suggestions. We are preparing for the interim review of the SCA. We should take this opportunity to enhance the current system. 2 points here. First of all, the government should have more RE being the source of fuel. Well, residential accounts and business accounts can sell RE generated electricity to the power companies. This should be enhanced so that post-2033 we should make greater use of RE. The government should also enhance regional cooperation, import more clean energy, so that we can cut down on carbon emission in the long term. For years, we have had regional cooperation. There is a mechanism to get electricity from the mainland, namely the Daya Bay nuclear station. We don't need to open up the grid. We just need to have more discussion with the two power companies. We don't need to grant access to a third party. I think it is not quite practical and not quite feasible. Nuclear power generation is very cheap. It is almost zero emission. So we should raise the ratio of nuclear in the fuel mix of power generation. And then it means that we can achieve the targets in the Hong Kong Climate Action Plan 2050. And we should cut down the total carbon emission by 50%. And then ultimately we can achieve carbon neutrality. I think we should have a long-term energy fuel mix policy. Make sure that it's safe and reliable. We should have something which is flexible, that can that uses clean energy, like more RE, and then it means that in the long term we can cut down on emission. We can also spread the risk, and by diversifying the market, our prices can come down. So I spoke. Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I thank Mr. Michael Luk for moving the motion. Importing electricity from the mainland to stabilize the electricity tariffs. I support his motion as well as Simon Lee's amendment, but I'm against Andrew Lam's amendment because he's crossing out lowering the permitted return of the two power companies. I think that renders the original motion meaningless. Well, we have one country, two systems. We've been practicing capitalism so as to keep our economic momentum on a par with the other places, and we are an IFC. Businessmen will look at the risk as well as the profits. When you run a business, you run the risk of losing money. So there's no guarantee that you make a profit when you run a business. In Hong Kong, you will have your profits guaranteed and quite handsome. Namely, the public service provided by the two power companies. According to the SCAs signed by the Hong Kong government with them, the maximum permitted rate of return is 8%, and this poses payment of the profits tax. In other words, they are maximizing their profits and yet permitted by the Hong Kong government. How come that we permit a certain rate of return for the business of power generation? The government's justification is that we want a reliable source of power. I don't think that's the only solution. Well, the fuel cost is surging. The cost of generation will certainly go up. In order to make the 8% rate of return, the cost of generation will certainly be passed to the consumers. The tariff rates will go up. Starting from January this year, we are paying the new rate. For CLP, an increase of 6.4%, 5.5% in the case of HEC when it comes to the rate of increase for the tariffs. When compared with January last year, the net tariff rate increase is 19.8% for CLP, but 45.6% for the HEC. Our economy has not returned to normalcy. When the economy is in a poor shape, it is said that we should stay with the businesses. But then when the economy booms, we don't share the profits. I think it is a difficult life for us. Citizens have to find a way out, not just cutting down on the electricity consumed. Rather, they would have to stop using electricity, like going to the shopping malls to cool themselves down. Well, citizens don't get compensated at all. Now, what about monitoring a reliable supply of electricity? The government seems to be helpless. It's time for us to look at the SCA. The permitted rate of return should be lowered. The Hong Kong government should introduce competition in the market. We should develop RE as well as clean energy, and that can reduce the tariff rates. Well, the government should really work hard. Say, for example, enhance the tariff stability fund so that we have a better fuel cost mechanism so as to ease the burden of increase. Madam Deputy, I think the most important work is that the government should urge the power companies to enhance their operational transparency. There should be policies and measures to make sure that the companies will disclose more information to the public in terms of operation, financial matters, construction costs, maintenance costs, procurement prices of the fuels, interest costs of lending and financing, etc., so as to avoid excessive investment which would result in an increase in the tariffs. The government would like to help the citizens to resolve their livelihood issues. So I spoke. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Mr. Stanley, Madam Deputy, I would like to support the original motion moved by Ms. Honorable LUK Chung-hung and the amendment moved by Ms. Dr. Hoey Simon Lee, so that we can break the mode of monopolistic power market. But I would object to Honorable Andrew Lam's amendment because it goes against the original motion. According to the Competition Commission, the electricity power and power market lacks competition, and 3 suggestions were made. For example, more interconnections should be made with mainland power generating companies. Macau gets 90% of its electricity from the mainland, and they are still doing more. So it's really feasible to import electricity from the mainland. According to a report last year, CLP tariff is $1.55, and Hong Kong Electric is a 1.97. But in Macau, the tariff is only $1.3, and assumption is just $0.8. The Secretary for Environment and Ecology has said that importing electricity from the mainland may not result in lowering the tariff. This is not entirely correct. We have scheme of control agreements. It seems to suggest that the profit would be controlled, but actually the power companies are guaranteed profits, and they have many incidents as well. From 2019 to 2022, CLP registered 3,000 stoppages per year, and that is on average every day. We have 8 power stoppages. Last year, there was a major cable fire incident affecting 175,529 users. For Hong Kong Electric, the number of instances has dropped from 245 in 2027 to 140 in 2022. But last year, there was a serious incident affecting 8,223 customers. Usually, these incidents will not result in any penalty. And if they resume power supply within a certain period, they will get an incentive. This is ridiculous. The market has been successful in depressing the power tariff in Macau, and they are still seeking ways to improve power supply and reduce tariff. But what has the administration in Hong Kong done to lower the tariff? The FTU has been advocating buying electricity from the mainland to reduce power tariff in Hong Kong. When will our recommendation be accepted? So I speak. Dr. Teck Chi Yuen. Madam Deputy, I rise to speak in support of Honorable LUK Chung-hung's original motion and the relevant amendments. At present, power companies can get a maximum return of 8%. I'll appeal to the power companies that you are not trying to squeeze every dollar out of our people. And I also hope the 2 companies can tie over the difficulties with the people. And hope the 2 power companies, while trying to get maximum profit, can heed the situation faced by the community. We're not asking you to not to make profit, but you should be more socially responsible. We know that the 2 power companies have been participating in social development programs, so perhaps they should take note of the current difficulties faced by community and lower the tariffs. Well, the social welfare sector would like to get support of the power companies, such as those for the disadvantaged, the carers, etc. Although we get some resources and funding from the administration, but if these enterprises can help the disadvantaged in the community, they certain social benefits can be gained. Since these two power companies are big corporations, so perhaps they should participate more extensively in social welfare with NGOs so as to live up to their social responsibility requirements. Additionally, we should also look at the expansion of investment in the fixed assets, because the higher the ANVA, annual net fixed assets, the higher the profit. Of course, they would certainly like to get more assets in order to get a bigger profit. This is just what we imagined, but the government should exercise proper control so that there will not be unnecessary investment in fixed assets. Nowadays, we have to reduce emission and reduce carbon emission in particular. Apart from coal, there are other sources of energy such as renewable energy, and they have other green measures introduced in the power generation process. So the two power companies should do more in their contribution to the reduction of emission. The motion debate calls for transparency. Well, as a responsible members of this council, I would certainly like to see higher transparency. Very often we're told that the information is commercially sensitive. But as a socially responsible enterprise, higher transparency should be achieved so that the community can monitor the operations. And this actually their corporate social responsibility. As for the further opening up of the electricity market, we should explore the matter further. But I wonder whether the tariff can be reduced as a result. With these remarks, I support the original motion and the amendments. Mr. Tan Ka Pil. Thank you, Madam Deputy. With regard to this motion moved by Honorable LUK Chung-hung for importing electricity from the mainland to stabilize tariff in Hong Kong, this is a timely motion. With increasing fuel, the tariff is increasing forever and ever. For those using Hong Kong electric service, they have to pay $2 per kilowatt. And this is a cost that no one can avoid. More than 10 years ago, for those who are working in the service industry, who are providing service in Hong Kong, they would not have imagined that the power tariff is so high. You may think I'm a bit confused while I support the original motion and the amendment moved by Mr. Andrew Lam. The original talk about gradually opening up the market, but Mr. Andrew Lam talked about exploring the opening up of market. And also for the original motion, the permitted return is set to should be reduced. But Mr. Andrew Lam delete this particular phrase. So the two are quite different. I know that there will be a vote accept by division. Well, if it ask me, a reliable electricity supply would be the first and foremost important factor, because we cannot afford any incident lasting for a mere second or even lower. And we need to go for carbon emission. This is a national policy. And lastly, we should ensure that tariff is reasonable. So if I go by this priority list, honestly speaking, we need to proper exercise control over the permitted return. But we should not do this for the sake of exercising more control, because we need to make sure that there is sufficient investment in the grid to ensure reliability and dependability. And how can we reduce the tariff pay by ordinary people? If I do nothing about the permitted return, what can I achieve? What can I do to reduce people's burden? Of course, under the one country, two systems principle, we can work within this room for maneuver. We should not be bogged down by whether we should get zero carbon energy or clean energy. Well, actually, the mainland has this broad principle on a carbon neutrality. So this will be done by the mainland. If we are close to Sichuan and Guizhou, we will make the best use of green energy. So we don't need to be concerned about the fuel mix, because this is being regulated by the mainland. So first of all, we have to ensure reliability of power supply. Second, we need to go for green fuel, green power. And then the third one, to reduce permitted return. So Mr. LUK Chung-hung is correct. Buy more electricity from the mainland and make use of the opportunity of the interim review to ask the two power companies to reduce tariff. Otherwise, there's nothing we can do more. So I speak.
Ms. Elizabeth Quat. I thank Mr. Michael Luk for moving this motion on importing electricity from the mainland and stabilize electricity tariffs in Hong Kong. This year, the CLP and HET introduced tariff hikes of up to 20 to 45%. These two power companies are responsible for stabilizing electricity tariffs such that they can be lowered to a reasonable and affordable level. Now, the DAB and myself have been advocating the import of electricity from the mainland to stabilize electricity tariffs. We support the original motion and Dr. Hoey Simon Lee's amendment. Now, in recent years, a few costs around the world have continued to escalate. The costs are transferred by the two power companies onto the public, whilst these two companies continue to reap the maximum profit of 8% as a PRR. Now, we believe the stabilization fund should be set up so that in times of need, the tariff can be stabilized. We also believe the incentive penalty mechanism should be reviewed. Earlier, there was a power supply incident relating to HEC, leading to a power outage of 45 minutes. However, according to the current SCA, if power is resumed within 65 minutes, then the power company could get an incentive payment of up to 0.15%. That means the company could get an incentive for the mistake they have committed in the first place. We believe power should be resumed in the case of outage as quickly as possible, or else they should face a penalty. This incentive mechanism should be scrapped. The penalty mechanism should be enhanced. Now, in the event of power outage, apart from the indicators, the power supply stability will also be affected. The indicator is calculated on the basis of the duration of outage. If the reliability of the year is above 99.96%, then the power companies can enjoy an incentive payment of 0.015%. Basically, that means under the mechanism, the companies will only receive an incentive and not a penalty. It should be reviewed as quickly as possible. The DAB and myself have all along championed the import of clean energy, so that such as nuclear energy, so as to help achieve the carbon neutrality goal by 2050. The China Southern Power Grid have been proactively taking forward the project in Greater Bay Area, the reliability in Zhuhai now reaches 99.99%. And for Hong Kong government in Tseung Kwan O Area 132, strategic electricity facilities will be constructed for the as reception of power imported from the mainland. According to the Secretary, in terms of fuel mix, the ratio of nuclear energy will go up from 30 to 60%. We believe in the name of stabilizing tariffs, this is necessary. Well, there have been concerns on nuclear energy, but after decades of discussion with escalation in the cost of coals and other natural resources, the public will now be more accepting to the idea of nuclear energy. We believe the government should work out the details of using nuclear energy and explain the proposal to the public. We keep an open mind about the motion's proposal. The DAB believes a more detailed study should be conducted. To open up the electricity market, it should be done on the premise of providing Hong Kong with clean, safe, reliable, and affordable power supply. After opening up the electricity market, we should avoid fluctuations in the tariffs because of abusive practices. As for Mr. Andrew Lam's amendment, I agree that the market should be opened up and that zero carbon energy should be procured without compromising the performance of the two power companies on safety, reliability, and protecting the environment. But because of Mr. Lam's proposed amendment, his idea goes against the DAB's what the DAB advocates. So we're going to vote no to Mr. Lam's amendment. Mr. Lai Tung Kwok, Madam Deputy, I thank Mr. Michael Luk for moving this motion. We believe that the importing electricity from the mainland is our future. In 2018, when the CLP's plan to import electricity from the mainland was approved, it was estimated that in terms of fuel mix, the imported energy will go up from 25 to 35%. However, the imported electricity could only serve CLP clients, whereas on the island side, customers are not benefited. Luckily, the Hong Kong government has a plan to build electricity facilities in Tseung Kwan O Area 132 so as to allow the imported electricity to be transmitted to the Hong Kong island side. Now, once the plan is completed by 2035, it is expected that the ratio of imported electricity from the mainland will further go up to 70%. If everything goes smooth, that means the percentage of imported electricity will increase from the current 25% to 70% in 12 years. So this is a rather substantial increase. I thank the government for the effort. But apart from importing electricity from the mainland, we should also ensure safe and reliable supply in Hong Kong. And when we consider the mode of connection with the grid in the mainland, for example, whether we should connect to the China Southern Power Grid network or to the plants themselves, if the percentage of imported electricity goes up to 35%, we're only importing nuclear energy. The Daya Bay nuclear power station has a high percentage of reliability. We are reassured, but in terms of the Hong Kong government's participation, we also have a large-scale drill involving different government departments and bureaus. The Hong Kong government should keep an eye on international developments. Meanwhile, the government should also maintain close liaison with the experts and relevant authorities around the world so as to enhance our responsiveness to any contingencies. Now, with the double safeguard of the station standards and the Security Bureau's contingency plan, we will have the prerequisite to increase the percentage of imported electricity. Now, I have some comments on the wording of the motion. For example, the two power companies are urged to disclose their operational and financial information to the public. After all, this is commercially sensitive information. If we force the two companies to disclose such information to the public, this may hamper the bargaining power of the two power companies with when they negotiate with the suppliers. Now, this will mean a more expensive tariff for the public. So it will be a lose-lose. All along, the government abides by the four major energy supply principles in terms of safety, environmental protection, reliability, etc. There should not be any change to this established policy. However, we are facing more constraints. For example, we need to abide by the country's zero carbon or carbon neutrality goal, and according to the Hong Kong's Climate Action Plan 2050, we also have laid down the hard indicator of using zero carbon energy. So in terms of the four major policy objectives, safety, reliability, affordability, and environmental protection, I do have some doubts. Even if we increase the ratio of imported electricity from the mainland, if we want to ensure safe, reliable, zero carbon energy supply in Hong Kong, will we still be able to achieve all the objectives? There are many uncertainties. And anyway, this is what I want to say to the government. Before making any change to the policy objectives, there should be full communication with the public and the Legislative Council. The plan should be fully explained to the public to allay their concerns. Mr. Tommy Zhao. Thank you, Madam Deputy. The Liberal Party supports any study that can help stabilize electricity tariffs. In relation to the original motion and the amendments, we agree with most of them. However, we do have reservations about certain suggestions. The Liberal Party all along has supported a review of the scheme of control agreements to review the permitted rate of return so that the tariffs can be lowered. As a matter of background, all along the CLP and the HEC are the two power companies to provide electricity to Hong Kong. They have their respective power generation units and transmission lines, including the distribution network. The first scheme of control agreement was signed in 1964, and then through several decades, different elements were included in the scheme of control agreements so as to meet the government's energy policy objectives. As far as the permitted rate of return of the two power companies are concerned, the PRRs have continued to come down. The major change came in 2008 when the new SCAs were signed. The PRR was lowered from 13.5% to 9.9%, and then further lowered in 2017 to 8%. The SCA's tenor increased from 10 years to 15 years. That means the current SCAs will expire in 2033. Now, what does 8% mean? Now, if taking bank deposits as an example, you can now get 4 to 5% interest. So 8% may not seem excessively high, but we have been in an ultra-low interest rate environment, and yet the power companies could continue to enjoy 8%. Now, why is it that in Mr. Andrew Lam's amendment, he has deleted this statement of reviewing the 8% PRR? We have reservations about this. As for Dr. Lee's amendment, he suggests that the government should start preparing for the opening up of the power grid so as to introduce new market entrants and to reduce the capital investment to stabilize tariffs. Now, the Liberal Party agrees, but that it should not happen at this very moment because from the Macau experience, well, they have introduced electricity from the mainland, and yet in terms of tariffs, they are on a par with those in Hong Kong, just perhaps cheaper by several dozen cents. Now, we also have reservations about this. Mr. Michael Luk's original motion urges the two power companies to disclose financial and operational information to the public, including the maintenance costs and depreciation of the generating units, the prices of bulk energy purchases, the interest costs of lending and financing, and related information, so as to enhance the public's right to know and the transparency of their operations. The Liberal Party has reservations. These two power companies are listed companies. They abide by the statutory disclosure requirements in terms of disclosing information. For other information, it may be commercially sensitive. Now, we also have two other points to make. Tariffs in Hong Kong cheap. There are many places around the world with much higher tariffs. Regardless of our views on the two power companies over the past several decades, these two companies have been supplying electricity to Hong Kong in a safe and reliable manner. In order to achieve the carbon neutrality goal set by the Hong Kong SAR government, these two power companies are required to adopt cleaner energy sources. They are required to phase out coal-fired generating plants and increase the use of renewable energy. These two measures will mean an increase in their operating costs, and by then it is inevitable that tariffs will continue to go up. Perhaps we should consider how we can slow down the rate of increase.
Mr. Chen Hecken. Madam Deputy, I speak in support of Mr. Michael Luk's motion in relation to the importation of electricity from the mainland to stabilize electricity tariffs in Hong Kong. Madam Deputy, for the past 2 years, international oil prices soared, and so the electricity costs went up, and in fact, the increase in cost was totally passed to the customers. With permitted return, they maximized their profits up to 8% as the rate of return. It has attracted criticism. The community spoke with a single voice against this, and it is said that the companies have not discharged their social corporate responsibility. This is affecting our economic recovery. I know the Secretary has started negotiation with the power companies seeking to lower the permitted rates of return, or under special circumstances, they should share the fuel costs with the customers. So I think the government has taken the first step. Last time, I asked the Secretary in this chamber that you should start negotiating with the power companies. You have a good bargaining chip. But of course, it is not easy to get this from the power companies. They may not want to listen to the government. Therefore, I think the most important point is to import zero-carbon energy from the mainland, and then we would not be held ransom by the power companies. Just now, many colleagues mentioned about nuclear energy, renewable energy from the mainland. They have my support. I would like to share with you the following. We have the Climate Action Plan 2050, and the government has this proposal to make. That is, in 2030, we should have a higher level of RE. It should be up to 10% from 7.5%. If we can make better use and greater use of local RE, we can cut down on electricity generated by the power companies, and we can suppress their tariffs. 10 years ago, when I started my career as a lawmaker, I advocated that we should have greater use of solar energy. I made 2 suggestions. First, for the restored landfills, since we are not able to build residential blocks, they should be filled with solar panels, and then the energy thus generated can help us out. Another proposal from me was that there should be the floating photovoltaic panels in reservoirs. Both of them have been taken up by the government, but 8-9 years after my first mentioning it, the government should have done it much earlier, and then our RE targets could have been reached earlier, or we can raise the ratio of RE, and we don't have to rely on the power companies to deliver. For the development of solar energy all around the world, it has become the focus. On the mainland, they have done an excellent job. For the solar panels in the mainland, they use it as a way to alleviate poverty. Other than the hilly region, residents could benefit from the solar energy. The poor communities also get subsidies as a result of selling the electricity outside of their hilly regions. And then for the reservoirs, we can also make good use of both the water as well as the water service. Now we have the fit-in tariff scheme. In other words, if you have solar panels installed on your rooftop, you can sell your electricity. You should be further promoted. For the so-called cloud bus, I think, in fact, they can use solar energy to run the trains, or the buses. I think it is a good idea. We should explore more ideas. Other than importing energy from the mainland, RE can be developed locally. There is huge potentials here. Thank you. Next, Mr. Hon LUK Chung. Madam Deputy, I am grateful to Mr. Michael Luk for moving the motion. Importing electricity from mainland to stabilize electricity tariffs in Hong Kong. On the question of electricity tariffs, of course, we are bothered by the ever-increasing tariffs. We have the scheme of control agreements. The permitted rate of return is 8%, and so they are maximizing their profits. In recent years, the fuel has been switched to natural gas, pushing up the cost. Now prices are going up across the board. The economy has just started its recovery, so it is only adding to the burden of our livelihood. The most outrageous point is that recently there was a power outage on the Hong Kong island. The supply was restored within the specified period of time. The power company even got an incentive. This is most unreasonable. I'm grateful to Michael Luk for giving us this opportunity to explore the issue further. Madam Deputy, I know the government is getting ready to revisit the SCA, in particular adjusting the ceiling of the permitted rate of return. Of course, we would like to see a downward adjustment of the permitted rate of return. Otherwise, we don't feel that the energy bill can be suppressed. This is a must that the government must deliver. On the other hand, today we talk about importing electricity from the mainland, in particular the interconnection with the Daya Bay nuclear power station. I think it is something that we need to consider further. Try to compare the following and you understand my argument. For the HEC, you pay almost $2 per unit of university, $1.50 for CLP supply, and then 80 cents for Shenzhen. You can see the stark contrast. Even for the CLP with Nutri-Starch, yes, they have got the interconnection with the Daya Bay nuclear power station. In other words, nuclear energy is being supplied to Hong Kong's CLP, but not so to the HEC. Therefore, the Bureau should do the following. That is, the government should make sure that both power companies will be given the steer and given the pressure as well, so that they will be made to think about getting more energy from the mainland, in particular the Daya Bay nuclear power station in Guangdong province. The infrastructure is already there and we have the facilities. Then it is only natural to increase the volume of supply. Of course, our observation tells us that The diabase power is competitive in terms of pricing, and it is almost zero emission energy. It's cheap, it is also safe. So I believe that we should go along that direction. I hope the Bureau will take this opportunity to talk to the two power companies. The negotiation should start with getting them buy more electricity from the mainland. As to the opening up of the power grid, I think we should study more. We should carry out more research and look at the pros and cons. I think we need a study on the pros and cons. However, when it comes to the implementation, we need to be very, very cautious. As you know, that only recently we said that we would like to have the reindustrialization of Hong Kong. We need a reliable power supply for our reindustrialization process. When we do open up our power grid, can we be assured of reliability? There's a priority issue that we must consider. So the government must be very cautious, and the government should look at all the elements as a whole picture. I hope the administration will, having listened to us, at least first of all, ask the power companies to get more energy from the mainland and make sure that there will be better arrangements when it comes to interconnection. So I spoke. Thank you. Mr. Shang Hai-lung. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I must thank Mr. Michael Luk for moving the motion. Well, for the tariff increases, I think they're adding to our living costs. And in fact, all the enterprises have seen their operational costs going up. Now, many businessmen are saying that electricity prices are affecting them a lot. Before talking about stabilization of tariffs, I need to be objective. I have to give recognition for the efforts of the power companies. Yes, there were power outages, but in general and by comparison, their service quality is good and reliable. There was a multinational corporation leaving India. The lack of reliability of power supply was one of the reasons. When you look at Sydney, New York and London, we built a better performance in terms of reliability of electricity. We need to suppress the rates of increase. We need to look at the price, service quality, social responsibility, and environmental protection. In 2050, we would like to achieve carbon neutrality, and we need to come up with feasible options. Other than the constructive suggestions made by my colleagues, I would like to have 2 points here. First of all, we have the West-East gas pipeline too. We can make better use of that. And then we have the offshore LNG terminal in Hong Kong waters. Well, of course, we are getting the gas from the western region of China, and then for our national government, we know that for the CLP has made use of this gas supply, but less than half of the volume used. In answer to my question, in fact, we have been told that it hasn't actually been used. Yes, the maintenance of the pipeline is a issue. In fact, there is a rich reserve of natural gas in our motherland. Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and the GBA cities are already making good use of the natural gas locally to stabilize their tariffs. So I think we should consider the same. Making use of the West-East gas pipeline can reduce our reliance on an external supply. It can add to the reliability and safety of our fuel supply. In the past, we used to count on natural gas, coal, etc. And in fact, we became very passive when the prices fluctuate. If we make good use of the West-East gas pipeline, then it would further enhance the reliability of our fuel supply. We should also make better use of the offshore LNG terminal. We should attract more customers for the bunkering services. Well, the two power companies are shareholders of the offshore LNG terminals. The profits made therefrom, and in fact they were license to run this service. Profits arising from the offshore LNG terminal should be translated into rebates for their own customers. I have made this suggestion and it has been given the recognition of the Bureau. I hope that the Secretary will make sure that this will be done. Well, electricity is a daily necessity. It is also indispensable for our businesses. Of course, a company would like to protect the interests of their shareholders, but still they have their social responsibility to uphold. Well, we need to lower our costs. We should enhance our efficiency. This is something that we expect from each and every enterprise. Madam Deputy, I hope that the power companies will make good use of our advantage, that is with the strong support of the mainland government. And we should make good use of the offshore LNG terminal, make good use of the second West East gas pipeline. I think in this way we can ease the pressure of the rising living costs, and it means that we'll be given even better support to develop our role as the age centers as indicated in the 14th Five-Year Plan. So I spoke. Thank you.
多謝主席。Mr. Chen Kim-po, Hong Kong is an international city, a international financial hub. Steady power supply is instrumental. Hong Kong power supply is basically reliable and safe. But while the power companies provide quality service, tariffs have been on the increase, adding to the already heavy burden of customers. To stabilize tariff, there are many suggestions, such as importing electricity. I thank Mr. LUK Chung-hung for moving this motion so that we understand the problems in our power market. Our power market is a small market. Therefore, we cannot avoid the award of a franchise. And that has led to higher tariffs. I won't repeat the points already made. I hope the government should review things such as a permitted report of NFAT as well as fuel clause tariff adjustments. Of course, the administration would try to get back maximum result, but the government should reason for its arguments. For example, we should give first priority to stabilizing tariffs. Secondly, we should not sacrifice safety and reliability of power supply. And thirdly, while we stabilize tariff, we should consider our commercial world, and that is the spirit of contract compliance. If we ignore investors' interest, we may end up with no investors and therefore sacrifice the long-term safety and reliability of power supply. I mentioned all these factors for consideration so that we can achieve a win-win situation for all. Because time is limited, I'll be concentrating on the proposal to import electricity from the mainland. 34% of our power electricity is from the mainland. It's hoped that we would like to increase it to 35%. A land has been reserved in Area 32 for reception of LNG. And it's said that after 2030, we can import 70% of electricity from the mainland. Actually, there's a obvious discrepancy between CLP and HAE. It has been said that there's a 30% tariff, but the tariff is a complicated matter. If I've visited two websites for general household customers, the difference is 19.6 to 22%. This is not ideal. The discrepancy between the tariff levels of the two power companies is the result of the difference in cost. Because CLP gets 30% of the electricity from Daya Bay Power Station, but 100% of the fuel used by Hong Kong Electric is imported, therefore resulting in the different tariffs. China has extensive supply of renewable energy. There are 4 power nuclear power plant in Guangdong with the more further integration with the Greater Bay Area. I think this is the direction to go by importing more electricity from the mainland. If we import more nuclear power generated electricity, this is the most feasible way out. Because it has been proved that nuclear energy is safe and reliable. All in all, importing electricity can stabilize tariff. The government has already got plans to import more electricity. I hope the imported electricity can be evenly distributed to two power companies, so Hong Kong Electric can lower its tariff. As for the cross-boundary interconnection arrangement, I hope that there could be early implementation. Of course, we need to address the concern and problem faced by local community so that we can get a better result as early as possible. Mr. Yang Wing Kit, Madam Deputy, I support the motion of Mr. LUK Chung-hung. At present, the permitted return is 8%, and the fuel costs will be passed on to consumers. If we want to stabilize tariff, we must deal with both aspects. Well, the SCA would only expire in 10 years' time, and in the meantime, we can only tolerate any tariff increase. The government should actively discuss with the two power companies to reduce the rate of increase in tariff. The government is actually providing subsidy. I think it's part of the income from the exchange fund and franchise income revenue generated by the granting of franchise should be pooled in a fund for stabilization. And also we are going to suffer high electricity tariff. We have to import more electricity to lower the tariff. The capacity of the interconnection with Daya Bay is limited. Well, a better way is to connect with the Guangdong power grid. If 9 years ago, the government made use of the public consultation at that time on expanding the scope of importation of electricity, then today or a year or 2 years later, we'll be able to enjoy cheaper energy. Buying nuclear power is not a bad thing. The nuclear energy is very efficient. We cannot rely on renewable energy such as solar power to meet our needs. If we fail to do all these, we would not be able to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. The Ukrainian-Russian war has a trigger of energy crisis internationally. And some countries have once again embraced nuclear energy, such as EU and EU countries. It's a international trend to use nuclear energy. Well, we have been utilizing nuclear energy for many years. Linglong number 1 plant is the first small nuclear power generation unit accredited by the International Atomic Agency, and 100% of these generation units are manufactured in China. They have generated 20 billion units of power, and they have reduced emission of 2.64 million and 6.332 tons. It's equivalent to 140 million trees. And now at present, electricity is also supplied to Pakistan. I would propose that we should build a facility in Area 132 so as to import more electricity, so that it would constitute 70% of power supply in 2035. There will be another nuclear power plant in Guangdong. In the future, power supply in Guangdong will be greatly increasing capacity. So importing electricity from Guangdong will not be a problem for us. The government and the two power companies should start the EIA and establish the objective ratio. And we should go for green hydrogen, which is the star of the new energy market. And China is ranked number 2 in this field in the world. And recently, there's a project to turn green hydrogen into liquefied hydrogen. The government should introduce or implement more zero carbon projects to and also reduce local electricity tariff. Mr. Chen Pui-leung, well, power tariff would affect people's livelihood, especially for electricity tariff. Everyone will be affected. I'm grateful to Mr. LUK Chung-hung for moving this motion so that we can have a discussion, a debate in this council on the question of importing electricity from the mainland and lower tariff in Hong Kong. Of course, I support whatever measure that we can lower tariff, but we need to consider 3 factors. First, where do we import electricity? From Shenzhen or from other Greater Bay Area? And in what ways are the electricity to be supplied to Hong Kong? And what is the ratio of the fuel mix? And what is the average cost? And what kind of electricity that we are going to purchase? Is generated by renewable energy or what? We need to conduct a study. Well, we have high tariffs because the power tariff is composed of basic tariff and fuel cost charges. And the fuel cost has been rising because of international crisis. Under the existing mechanism, the rising cost will pass on to our people 100%. Although the government also provides subsidy, we still have to pay very expensively for power. The power companies should share part of the cost as a kind of social responsibility. At present, the fuel costs are fluctuating violently. The 2 power companies should come up with a sharing mechanism instead of passing the cost on to customers indiscriminately. We should also review the SCAs. In 1964, we have the first SCAs, and now we have the 5th group. The permitted return has come down from 13.5% to 8.8%. One criticism is that the permitted rate is too high. That is, 8% of permitted return is too high. We should make use of the opportunity of the midterm review to see if this return rate can be reduced. Of course, the 2 power companies have to invest a lot into power generation, and that's why we offer such a permitted return rate. Reviewing the permitted return rate should be pragmatically done. As I've said, public utilities costs would have a wide-ranging effect, far-reaching effect, but it's important to pay attention to Hong Kong's situation. We are a densely populated area with many high-rise buildings. We need to ensure reliability of power supply and maintain our competitive edge. So while we want to lower tariff, we must strike a balance to ensure stability. We cannot sacrifice quality of supply. In 2030, we have the objective of reducing carbon emission by 50%. Fossil fuel will be phased out, such as coal, and we should have suitable zero tariff power generation facilities. And any arrangement and interconnection arrangement will be an important premise for achieving zero carbon emission. This is the direction for both mainland and Hong Kong. And in Zhangguanglong Area 132, there will be a new facility for the purpose of importing electricity. Whether we review the competition or the composition of power tariff, We must also strike a balance between environmental performance, reliability of supply, and cost of power supply, so as to ensure sustainability of power supply in Hong Kong. So as a speak.
Mr. Yim Kong. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I thank Mr. Michael Luk for moving this motion that is very much related to people's livelihood and for members to express their views from different perspectives. Reasonable tariff levels could help improve people's livelihood. We have a stable and safe, reliable supply of electricity in Hong Kong. They've contributed to economic development. In January 2023, for HEC, there was a 45.6% increase, or 75.1% increase over 10 years in terms of electricity tariffs. The CLP also introduced a tariff hike, albeit not to such a substantial extent. Now they affect people's livelihood. These two power companies supply electricity to new territories in Kowloon and as well as Hong Kong Island respectively. They have the respective generating units, but they do not have the economies of scale to share costs and enhance efficiency. On the contrary, they continue to put in investments on the fixed assets. There may be surplus in the capacity, but they can generate more return and the cost will be transferred onto customers. For residential units in Shenzhen, the tariffs only stand at just some 48% of the HEC's tariffs. This is due to the reform in the PRC in Macau. For Group A tariffs, the per unit tariff is just $1.37. This is due to the power companies sourcing energy from mainland China. The imported electricity accounts for 90%. We have very high safety coefficient, as the percentage has now increased to 50%, and nuclear energy is also a cleaner form of energy. Now the CSGI power grid is connected to the local power grid. As I understand, the China Southern Power Grid still have 50% capacity to export electricity. The chief executive advocates a result-oriented policy, and in order to achieve this policy objective, we should try to lower the cost of procurement. I have 4 suggestions. First, we should start a substantive study on opening up the electricity market in Hong Kong. Action plans should be devised and the public should be consulted. Second, the two power companies should refrain from building new generating units to deal with surplus capacity. At the same time, there should be stronger collaboration with China Southern Power Grid so that through importing electricity at a lower cost, we can meet future demand. And we can also ensure the safe, efficient, and reliable operation of the power grid in Hong Kong. Third suggestion, for new development areas such as the Northern Metropolis and Kao Yi Chau artificial islands, we should set up our own power grids separate from the existing grid so as to open up the market for new entrants. The fourth suggestion is when the two SEAs expire in 2033, these two power companies should be allowed to run the grid and manage the grid. Meanwhile, the government should open up the electricity market to allow the third-party participation. We hope that through reforming the electricity market in Hong Kong, we can lower the tariffs for the benefit of the people. I so submit. Mr. Tony Jie. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Due to geopolitical reasons, fuel costs around the world have increased. Electricity bills are also getting more expensive. This is putting a very heavy burden on people and enterprises. Comparing to many other places in the world, our electricity tariffs are not high despite the recent increase. In many other countries, because of power shortage, there are frequent outages affecting businesses and people's livelihood. Relatively speaking, we have a reliable and stable supply of electricity in Hong Kong. I think we top the chart. This supports Hong Kong's position as an international financial center, and it also supports the development of enterprises in Hong Kong. Now, in order to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, the two power companies in recent years have gradually reduced coal-fired generation and instead turned to cleaner energy sources. The change involves substantial investment. This also caused an increase in the operating costs and the tariffs. As I previously pointed out, it is important to protect the environment, but going green comes with a price tag. The original motion proposes two ways to deal with tariff increase. One is to open up the market and increase the percentage of imported electricity from the mainland. Now, the government is working in this direction, including the establishment of an electricity facility in Tseung Kwan O Area 132. In fact, the local community has objected to this proposal, citing that the project will cause landscape and visual impact adversely. The government should explain to the public the benefits of the project. Another option is to ensure that power supply can remain stable and reliable. I urge members to support the construction of such facilities. The second way to stabilize the tariffs is to review the fuel clause and urge the companies to fulfill their social corporate responsibilities. The permitted rate of return at the moment stands at 8%. It has come down from over 9% in the past. But in the eyes of the public, 8% is still too high, especially because it entails zero risk. Of course, any change to the scheme of control agreements will have to be agreed by both parties. The government should nevertheless strive to ask for a better deal on behalf of the public. Mr. Andrew Lam's amendment involves lowering the permitted return of the two companies. I believe by deleting this statement, it will put a straitjacket on the government in negotiating with the companies in the interim review of the SCA. And also, I think there is the third option that can help stabilize tariffs. It can achieve immediate results, and that is we should cut down on our energy consumption. There are ways circulating on the internet about saving energy. For example, we can install individual electricity meters to manage how we use electricity and when we should use it. I know the two power companies are helping the public install these meters. The government should perhaps provide assistance to help speed things up and to further promote this initiative. From the community's perspective, in order to introduce electricity use management during peak hours, enterprises should be urged to take part in the process so as to prevent further escalation of electricity tariffs, especially during peak hours. Instead of relying on the two power companies, the government should take a proactive approach. Mr. Duncan Shield, in the beginning of this year, the two power companies adjusted the tariffs, and in January this year, they increased the tariffs by 6.4% and 5.5% respectively, compared to the previous year's 19.8% and 45.6% respectively. As many members have spoken, the two power companies have continued to maximize the 8% permitted rate of return profit. This is breaking the back of the public and enterprises. I support Mr. Michael Luk's original motion on importing electricity from the mainland and stabilize electricity tariffs in Hong Kong. The government should import more electricity from the mainland. We should also lower the permitted rate of return of the two power companies so that there is room to further lower the tariffs. With fluctuations in global oil prices, the fuel costs around the world have continued to increase, and this is also happening in Hong Kong as well. But comparing to other cities nearby, our tariffs are not excessively high. Take 2022 November as an example. For CLP and HEC, the per unit price stood at $1.45 and $1.87. Now, Hong Kong is 200% more than the tariffs in Taiwan, and that is 0.71 New Taiwan dollars. Now, in Shenzhen, it's just 80 cents. Now, comparing to Shenzhen and other cities nearby, we are still having higher tariffs. So how do we make sure tariffs are affordable whilst maintaining stability? The Financial Secretary announced in the budget that a $1,000 subsidy will be provided to each household. This is far from sufficient. In 2015, the government published a consultation document, and in the objectives, there is a goal that is to introduce competition and buy electricity from the mainland. It didn't get the public support, but it's high time we consider this option again, because at the moment, 70% of power supply comes from coal-fired generating units, but there are nowadays more options. For example, we can use renewable energy to replace fossil fuel energy, and we also have the policy of phasing out coal-fired generating units starting 2026. And if we can import electricity from the mainland, we can help lower tariffs for the public. And I'm glad to know that there have been discussions with the mainland authorities to increase the import of electricity from the mainland, including nuclear energy. The government has also earmarked a site in Tseung Kwan O Area 132 for electricity facilities to be built so as to receive imported electricity from the mainland. It is envisaged that by 2035, the percentage of imported electricity can go up by 30%. This will help ensure stable and reliable supply of energy to alleviate the burden on the people and enterprises. I hope the government will put forward requests during the interim review of the SCAs, such as reviewing the current incentive penalty mechanism and to impose heavier penalties for power outages without compromising the reliability of power supply. The grid should be opened up to invite competition of new market entrants. We're going to support the amendment moved by Dr. Hoey Lee from G19. Now, a stable power supply affects everybody, including the operators of data centers. According to a survey this year, our ranking in terms of data center operations has gone up from the 6th place last year to the 4th place this year. This is a major industry for the I&T sector. But many operators or developers are now having interest in second-tier cities and emerging markets in Asia because these places have ample land supply. They enjoy an edge. And according to the operators, the operating costs are now escalating up to 20-30% of the total cost because of the electricity tariffs. So we are concerned that this might eat into our advantage of attracting overseas data center operators to come to Hong Kong. I hope the government will take on our suggestions. That is to build level 4 compliant data centers in the northern metropolis.
Mr. Chung-hung. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Madam Deputy, reliability of power supply used to be very good as far as Hong Kong is concerned, even though in the past year or so, we have experienced major power outages under both companies. But still, by comparison, reliability is good. For the outages, we try to look at the number of times that the service was interrupted. When it comes to reliability, we need to consider the following. That is, if someone would like to apply for electricity supply but rejected, or eventually the electricity cannot be supplied, it should be counted towards the reliability performance. In the past, there were experiences that someone would like to apply for electricity supply, but they couldn't, or they would like to enhance the capacity but were rejected. Say, for example, there is somebody who bought a piece of land trying to run a data center. Government approval was granted, but then the power company said that it would only be year 2047 that the transmission network would reach his site. This does happen from time to time. If the capacity has already run out and if the power company has no interest to expand the network, then developers or users will be disappointed. Well, I think this should be counted towards the reliability performance. The second point is that electric cars are going to be with us in the new territories. Many people would like to set up charging stations for the taxi trade, for the goods vehicle trade. They are looking for sites to have charging stations. Unfortunately, regrettably, when they approach the power companies, either they are told that the distribution network hasn't reached them, or they have to wait in the queue. In other words, it has impacted upon our economic activities, or citizens' daily lives are being affected. So this is also something that we should bear in mind when we consider the reliability. The number of cases rejected, the number of cases refused should also be considered. So please consider my suggestion here. Second point is that every time when we receive our electricity bill, we will look at the fuel clause charge. However, when we read from the newspapers, we are told that the companies have got a safeguard, that is the permitted rate of return. We know that there is a cap on the surcharge in relation to the fuel clause charge. But still, as a result of the permitted rate of return, customers have got a very negative impression of the power companies. I do hope that the power companies won't be maximizing their profits. Otherwise, it will generate a sort of resentment on the part of the customers. For the northern metropolis, including Shantin Technopole, as well as the River Loop, they are very near to the mainland city. If we can be connected with the mainland grid, the data centers will use a large amount of electricity. It will cost us $1.40. If we can use the cheaper energy from across the river, it will benefit the data center operators. We should be allowed to do so. Otherwise, we'll be blocked in terms of development of data centers here. We should have diversification. We should allow electricity to be supplied from across the boundary so that we can get the electricity by interconnecting with the mainland grid. Our data center will have huge development potential then. Thank you. Professor William Wong. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Well, as a result of climate change, temperatures are rising. We are not yet at the peak of summer, but then the temperature went up to 38 degrees Celsius. Many families have no choice but to switch on the aircon for the night. The fuel cost is going up, and it is adding to the tariff rates and thus the financial burden of many households. We should open up the power market. We should provide opportunities for new suppliers. Expediting the importation of electricity from the mainland will be the quickest way to resolve the problem. I think when we plan for our power generation, we should broaden our view to cover the GBA. We should tie in with the national policies as well. In 2030, we should reach the carbon peak, and in 2060, there should be the carbon neutrality. To reach the dual objectives, the national government has been developing green energy. For us, we would like to have carbon neutrality in the year 2050. Importing electricity from the mainland can lower our tariff rates. We can also tie in with the national targets. Currently, power generation is the main source of carbon emission. For us to reach the phase targets in 2030, as was the ultimate target of 2050 of neutrality, we should import energy, in particular green energy, and then it means that we can hugely cut down on our carbon emission. Just not too long ago, in Area 132 of Chung Kwan-o, we know that strategic electricity facilities will be built so that we can get electricity from the mainland. It will be built by the government. In other words, it would not be boosting the fixed assets of the power companies and thus enabling them to earn more profits. I think the power companies on either side of the boundary should be interconnected, and then electricity can be transmitted both ways. I'm sure this will drive down the tariff rates, but then it will be 10 years down the road before we get it. It is too far away as a solution. We should explore other solutions as well. The government has said that the two companies should be asked to share the rising fuel costs. I hope the power companies would also tie in with the government's efforts. The two companies will also echo the government's goal of carbon neutrality. Other than the green infrastructure, we should also look at changes in the fuel mix. But of course, that would have an impact on the tariff rates. While we try to achieve carbon neutrality, we should also make sure that the prices are reasonable. In particular, the underprivileged households, please don't make them bear more financial costs when we are trying to achieve our environmental targets. There should be subsidies. I know there are already subsidies. They should be continued. Importing energy cannot just be done by the power companies alone. So the SAR government must, in relation to such regional cooperation projects, draw reference from other successful examples, set up a good framework so that we can have a good negotiation mechanism for the importation of zero carbon energy, so that power companies can plan early, so that the 2050 carbon neutrality target for Hong Kong can be achieved ASAP. Thank you. Mr. Martin Leong. Madam Deputy, I thank Mr. Michael Luk for moving the motion. We have only got the COP as well as the HEC that generate, transmit, distribute, and sell electricity. They have a oligopoly here. Between them, they don't actually have any competition at all. For the COP as well as the HEC, they are actually public utilities. It is a public service. Electricity is a strategic good affecting our economic performance and our livelihood. Both of them should shoulder their SCR. Our economy hasn't really recovered, and 8% being the permitted rate of return means that it is adding to the financial burden of the people, in particular the grassroots. For the government, I think it should review the regulatory framework, and you should consider opening up the market gradually so as to suppress the tariff increases. Yes, we have the schemes of control agreements monitoring the operation of the two companies. The government has made it clear that when it carries out the interim review of the SCAs, there will be discussions. I think there are 4 points to bear in mind. First of all, for the prices, they're made up of the basic tariff rate as well as the fuel cross charge. For the fuel cross charge, it is a reimbursable part. The two companies don't have to bear the risk of international fuel price fluctuations. In the interim review, the government should consider the following. That is, making the companies share the fuel cost, make the power companies share the risk of the fuel cost fluctuations, and bear their social corporate responsibilities. For the permitted rates of return, it is about the average net fixed assets. We should encourage the power companies to reduce their carbon emission. So in order to switch to cleaner energy, they have to add to their fixed assets. They are now building their offshore LNG terminals. I'm afraid that would add to their assets, and that would also increase the pressure on the tariff rate increases. I think in the long term, we should look at this formula, whether it is reasonable, and whether we should lower the permitted rate of return of 8%. Thirdly, for the customer incentive penalty mechanism. Last June, there was the CLP outage, and in June this year, there was the blackout on the Hong Kong island. I'm afraid the incentive penalty mechanism doesn't actually cover the major blackout incidents, and there's no clear definition about the blackouts. And then for blackouts caused by human errors, even though power was resumed soon, they cannot be allowed to collect an incentive. And under the SCA, I think the government should make preparations for opening up the market to third-party access so that there will be competition and citizens will have a choice and they will benefit from it. Well, on the mainland, they are pushing for zero carbon electricity. I think green energy is getting cheaper and cheaper. We should go after that direction, and we'll be free from the international fuel price fluctuations. So we should get more electricity from the mainland, and in the long term, we can stabilize the electricity tariffs. Currently, 25% of the electricity will come from the mainland. In future, it will go up to 70%. I think we should have more negotiation with the mainland so as to make sure that we have a diversified supply of electricity, and then citizens don't have to bear the high tariff rates. But then if we are over-reliant on the mainland supply, and if something goes wrong, it will be a major issue. So the government must make sure that there will be a reliable source of power. I support Mr. Simon Hoey Lee's amendment and Mr. Michael Luk's original motion. Thank you.
Mr. Doreen Kong. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. LUK Chung-hung for moving this motion. I also want to speak in support of the amendment moved by Mr. Andrew Lam. In particular, the fact that Mr. Lam has pointed out the importance of reliability of the power supply. It's important that we have reasonable electricity tariffs. But I do agree with the point that the government should review the scheme of control agreements in a timely manner. But reasonable tariff is just one aspect of the power market. We have to look at the capacity, the quality of power supply, reliability, safety, and environmental performance. All these should not be neglected. We have been talking about developing infrastructure. Well, but power generation is an important infrastructure. In the world, we always rank very high in terms of quality infrastructure. Reliable electricity supply is very important to any place in terms of development potential. I've read an article in 2021 saying that many countries are suffering or are facing obstacles in development because of unstable power supply. Although we have some outage and incidents in Hong Kong, but they were all rectified and remedial in a timely manner. People do attach importance to reliability of power supply. In Hong Kong, there are many high-rise buildings. We have a lot of economic activities taking place every day. So power outage will not just affect people's livelihood, but also affect our status as an international financial center. Any commercial entity would face a pressure to earn the maximum profit. This is also true of power companies. I hope we can adopt a balanced attitude. We need to stabilize tariffs and to put people's mind at ease. We should also provide suitable incentive for investors and for power companies to continue to invest and improve quality so that Hong Kong remains a competitive place. A carrot and stick approach is important in respect of both the stick and the carrot. So I speak. Mr. Agent Ho, thank you, Madam Deputy. Well, recently, fuel costs are rising rapidly. No country is spared from the cost and pressure. Hong Kong, of course, is no exception. But apart from electricity tariffs, in the past years, CLP and Hong Kong EC also have a major incidents. And what happened after those incidents make people wonder or make people concerned about the power market and electricity power. I would like to talk about the system in operation. Power supply is important for society to develop. We need to ensure stable tariffs. It's important for the revival of economy and people's livelihood. All along, we have not got any legislation to regulate the social responsibility to be taken up by the power companies. But back in 1964, the then Hong Kong government signed some scheme of control agreements with the two power companies, and this is regularly done and updated over the years. For 59 years, the administration has signed 5 rounds of scheme of control agreements. The latest one would last for 15 years, and that is to say they would expire in 2033. One of the concerns in the SCAs is the rate of permitted return mentioned by Mr. LUK Chung-hung in the motion. To many people, the two power companies would get the maximum out of the SCA and get 8% of permitted return. This problem is due to the very complicated calculation method in the SCA. In order to calculate the permitted return, well, I have spent a lot of time on the financial reports and the annual reports because I need to differentiate local investments and overseas investment, and also how the different revenues are accounted. Although I read very carefully, I would say that much of my effort is just guesswork, or my understanding of the agreement is far from clear. The most important thing to do now is for the administration to discuss with the power companies and come up with a transparent and easy to understand SCA, having balanced different factors, so that the SCAs can regulate the operation of the two power companies and the tariffs are at an acceptable level. I think this is important. to the administration and fair to the administration and the two power companies and the people's right to know. And also we should look at room for improving the principle that we have espoused for some 60 years. So I speak. Miss Judy Chan. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Globally, we have seen different measures introduced to tackle high fuel costs. And we are also affected by extreme weather, and power consumption has increased. And given our social conditions, people's pressure would just be very heavy if we have to pay for expensive power supply. I thank Mr. LUK Chung-hung for moving this motion so that we have this debate on our fuel market, and also how we can consider ways and means to help our people in coping with the electricity tariffs in Hong Kong. I believe this motion is moved in the interest of the people of Hong Kong, and the major direction proposed is beneficial. But just like the UK and Singapore, where they have this vertical scheme of operation for their power company, although they subsequently open up their market. But there's no information so far that shows that the opening up of the electricity market will have a direct relationship with lower tariffs. The power companies have all along been run by private enterprises. But in other places, the power generation business is controlled by the government. And they gradually changed the government-controlled market to one run by mainly private enterprises. So they have a very different market from us. If we impose unreasonable requirements on power companies, this will affect the reliability of power supply, and ultimately our citizens will suffer. I note that in the original motion and in amendments, they have made many good suggestions, but some of the other recommendations cannot really be implemented. In order to maintain stable electricity tariffs, that the first and most important option is to import zero carbon electricity from the mainland, and then we will not be affected by the fluctuation in the fuel costs. So I'm glad to learn from the Secretary yesterday that we're going to import more electricity from Daya Bay, and there will be a reception facility in Area 132 to import more electricity from the mainland, so the share of the imported power would go up from 25% to 70%, and tariff will be more stable in the future as a result. To realize this, I hope the government can step up its efforts, and that is before 2035. There should be more medium-term and short-term measures and setting up of KPIs, and also explain to the public more about what is to be done, so that you won't give the public a false impression that you are moving really very slowly. And we should implement measures that will benefit the public very quickly, and so that people will not misunderstand the situation to be a stalemate. I hope the government can do more and actively relieve our pressure and address our concerns. So I speak.
Mr. Gary Zhang. Thank you. Madam Deputy, I thank Mr. Michael Luk for moving this motion, and the two members for moving amendments. Like Mr. Michael Luk said, the electricity tariffs in Hong Kong have been on the rise. In the past 3 years, this has been the COVID-19 has plagued Hong Kong, Electricity tariffs have been on the rise, affecting people's livelihood. It is for the Council here to debate on the matter so as to import electricity from the mainland and stabilize tariffs in Hong Kong. Power supply is a public utility, it's a public service. The utility companies should bear corporate social responsibility. They should have regard to the social situation and the public's affordability. Electricity market is a monopolized market. There is no option for consumers to choose otherwise but to accept any tariff adjustment proposal. This also explains why the government is also responsible for negotiating with the power companies to rein in their profit level to ensure that people's livelihood will not be affected. Under the current mechanism, through the scheme of control agreements, the change in fuel costs can be directly transferred onto customers. Although the power companies will not make a profit in the process, they are allowed to earn up to 8% as a permitted rate of return. This is, in a way, a profit guarantee. But meanwhile, there are no clauses to compel the companies to share the profit with the public. During the pandemic, the economy was in the doldrums, and yet these two power companies could still enjoy a high percentage of rate of return as agreed in the scheme of control agreements. And we could not force them to tide people over the difficulties during the hard times. So is it that the power companies have shouldered their corporate social responsibility? It's food for thought. The government will have an interim review with the two companies on the SCAs very soon. From the middle of last year to now, the international oil prices have dropped by 50%, and yet this is not reflected in the fuel clause charge in the SCAs. So it is important for us to set up a mechanism so that whenever energy prices increase, our tariffs can increase slowly, and then when the energy prices come down, the tariffs should be adjusted downward immediately. That is why I think we should keep the wording of the original motion as to explore lowering the permitted return of the two power companies. Now, Mr. Andrew Lam also put forward another suggestion in the amendment, that is, during the negotiation, we should not compromise the reliability and safety of power supply as well as the environmental performance of the companies. I believe these are all important matters. In the Chief Executive's last policy address, the government puts forward the construction of the Northern Metropolis. It is now underway. Stable and competitive tariffs will mean a strong support for industrial development in Northern Metropolis in the future. So in its planning, the government should also consider the grid access arrangements so as to provide a stabilized and competitive electricity tariff to enhance our competitiveness in the I&T sector. Dr. Chow Meng Kwong. Electricity supply is a major infrastructure for supporting development in Hong Kong. The government signs the scheme of control agreements with the two power companies in order to regulate the demand and supply of electricity in the market. Well, this has been discussed in the community for a long time. It's high time that we reviewed the arrangements. The two power companies introduced tariff hikes from 19% to 45.6% respectively in the beginning of this year. This caused a public outcry. So the hikes attracted a lot of public attention. Last year, there was a cable fire in relation to Yuen Long, and there was a major outage in Tuen Mun, Yuen Long, Tin Shui Wai. And on Hong Kong Island, in recent months, another power outage incident happened. And these two incidents have sparked a discussion on the incentive penalty mechanism of the two power companies. Now, an interim review on the SEAs will be conducted in due course. This is an opportune time for the government to review the arrangements, including the transparency of the fuel clause charge, and also consider importing electricity from the mainland so as to stabilize electricity tariffs in Hong Kong. I support Mr. Michael Luk's motion and some of the amendments put forward by members so as to address the issues stemming from the SEAs. We need to admit that the tariffs in Hong Kong are higher than those in surrounding cities. In southern Lantau, I understand an $8 billion LNG offshore terminal will be built, and this will inevitably mean a transfer of costs onto customers directly. Now, if the government does not take action, the tariffs will continue to increase. According to the figures in the latter half of last year, the per unit price for CLP is $1.544, and for HEC, $1.97. And in other places, in Shenzhen is 0.8, in Taipei just 0.71. So that's just 70% of the tariffs in Hong Kong. In Singapore, the tariffs are cheaper, just 1.75. For the rapid increase in tariffs, the costs are directly transferred onto customers, especially for the escalating fuel costs. In the interim review, the government should require the power companies to disclose financial information, including how they come by these figures. More importantly, the government should be aware of this fact that electricity tariffs affect not only people's livelihood, the operating of business undertakings, but also social stability and how we attract talents. Now, the R&T development blueprint was announced last year, in which new industrialization is promoted. We need to focus on semiconductors and new energy transport. And the chief executive also said at the outset that we need to have R&T development to have a future. According to some, the R&T sector has fivefold energy consumption than other sectors. So they will account for 1% of total energy consumption by human population. So high electricity tariffs will be a deterrent for international data center operators to come. The Energy Authority in the mainland signed a memorandum of understanding with Hong Kong, supporting the long-term supply of natural gas and nuclear energy to Hong Kong. This provides the prerequisites for Hong Kong to achieve the carbon neutrality goal. The government should set up a mechanism with the two power companies. Now, if these two companies do not fulfill the corporate social responsibilities in view of the escalating fuel costs and continue to reap in 8%, then the government should build more facilities to import electricity from China, such as the one proposed in Chongqing Area 132. We have more nuclear power stations in Guangdong Province. They will be commissioned in 2025. So we need to actively consider other options so as to open up the electricity market. I so submit. Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, Mr. President. I thank Mr. Michael Luk for moving this motion so that we have this opportunity to debate on importing electricity from the mainland to alleviate the burden on the public whilst maintaining safe, reliable, affordable electricity supply at a reasonable cost. The year-on-year increase in the tariffs this year were 19.8% and 45.6% respectively. This is due to increase in fuel costs. For natural gas and coal prices, they increased by 2 to 5 times respectively. Against this upward global trend, Hong Kong has no alternative. But comparing to other cities, our tariffs are not very high. Comparing to London and New York, the CLP charge is actually 50% lower. In fact, the international fuel prices have come down. It's gradually becoming stable. It is expected that according to the fuel clause charge, the tariffs will come down. In June, the Hong Kong government will be introducing a new round of electricity subsidy scheme. $1,000 will be given to each household. This will entail $2.9 billion from the public coffers, benefiting 2.9 million households. And there is also the community support scheme put forward by the CLP to provide a financial assistance to elderly users and households in need. Apart from the short-term relief measures, in the medium to long term, we should work on improving the fuel mix so that we increase the ratio of nuclear energy and renewable energy. This can also help suppress the fuel cost increase and abide by the spirit of the two sessions so as to steadily progress towards the carbon neutrality goal. We have nuclear energy, coal and natural gas and renewable energy. Nuclear energy accounts for 1/3 of the mix, whereas in HEC, the mix is 50-50 without nuclear energy. Without compromising stability and reliability of supply, the two companies should gradually increase the percentage of nuclear energy in the mix. There should be stronger collaboration with the mainland counterparts to import nuclear energy from the mainland. On the review of the scheme of control agreements, I think the focus should not only be on lowering the permitted rate of return, but to strike the proper balance between maintaining safe and reliable supply and lowering the permitted rate of return. There should be a link between safety, reliability, affordability, and environmental protection. Now, if the power companies could achieve these policy objectives, they could earn up to 8% as permitted rate of return. Failing to do that, they should lower the rate of return. Finally, the government should step up publicity and public education to give energy-saving tips to the public and encourage energy-saving practices. Energy-saving technologies and equipment should be promoted. In 2022, the annual report of CLP mentioned that the air conditioning energy-saving initiative received positive feedback. They managed to save 30% of energy. This can benefit the general public. I so submit.
Mrs. Regina Yip. I have been listening to Mr. Michael Luk as well as other colleagues who spoke. As a result, I think we're talking about three major objectives when it comes to our expectations of the power companies. First, cheap electricity. Every time when the SCA is under review, the people and the media would expect a drop in their price. Second, we want to have safety and reliability in terms of electricity supply. It is important, as many has pointed out, for us to develop advanced manufacturing industries, for us to have quantum data centers, for us to have ChatGPT. I think you all know that when AR is involved, we need to consume a huge amount of electricity. We also encourage the switch over to electric vehicles. All this would result in a higher demand of electricity. We want it to be cheap. We would also be sure that it is reliable. And third, and of course, we want to have decarbonization. We want to have carbon neutrality in the year 2050. So colleagues and the population at large would like to see a decrease in the cost. We should import zero carbon energy from the mainland, including nuclear energy. It is now accounting for 25% of the CLP's supply. We want to get more, and therefore at Changguan-O Area 132, we are going to build a reception facility. We are doing our utmost. We have got the nuclear power. We have got the offshore liquefied natural gas terminal, jointly held by the two power companies. All such can go to reduce emission, but all such are capital-intensive investments. Electricity tariff rates have gone up a lot. This is because in the past, the power companies signed contracts to get cheap supply of coal and natural gas. All of them have expired. They need to procure new sources of fuel, and they have to secure clean energy. So it is difficult to achieve the three objectives at the same time. Colleagues have been talking about importing more and cheaper energy from the mainland. I read a news story saying that in the year 2023, some provinces and cities may experience a shortage at the peak of their demand. Generally speaking, there is a reliable supply, but when the demand peaks, then there would be the situation would be tight because of drought as well as the lower level of water in the lakes or rivers. When we go to the mainland to have a visit, other than the shopping malls and the hotels, generally speaking, during the summer days, they won't turn down the air temperature of the air conditioning systems. Well, whenever you enter a high-speed train station, you'll find that the temperature is rather high. They do their utmost to conserve energy. Quite unlike our government offices, quite unlike our shopping malls, we are going overboard when it comes to the optimal temperature of our air conditioning. We know that the mainlanders are conserving energy. Now we ask them to provide cheap energy to us. Is it reasonable? In Hong Kong, we have sort of over air conditioning. Sometimes when we go to a restaurant, we ask the operators to turn up the air temperature. Well, in Qinghai, the wind power only costs tens of cents only. But should we get the electricity at the same rate? It is a matter of national subsidy. Should we get that in that way? Or should the Hong Kong government subsidize it? Then it becomes a burden on the public purse. But it means that when the electricity is cheap, we will tend towards overconsumption of electricity, and it goes against our target of conserving energy to save the earth. I think we're duty-bound to explain to the citizens that nothing comes without a cost. If we want to have decarbonization, if we want to achieve zero carbon, we have to pay a price for that. Please pause. Mr. Benson Look. Thank you, Mr. President. Here we are having a debate. It isn't just a matter of whether we should cut the tariff rates for the electricity. We shouldn't just be talking about a single incident. Rather, we should strike a balance. We should allow the power companies to have sustainable development. On the other hand, we want to have economic development, decarbonization, and safeguarding the livelihood of our people. A scheme of control agreement has been signed between the power companies as well as the Hong Kong government. Now, the SCAs will expire in 2033. A new one can be drafted. When it comes to discussion of public administration issues, we should learn from history. In the 1960s, or since the 1960s, 5 agreements have been signed, bearing in mind the prevailing economic and social circumstances and the prevailing government policies. Changes, modifications have been carried out. For the permitted rate of return, it started at the level of 13.5%, now it has come down to 8%. So by pegging the permitted rate of return to the average fixed assets, well, I think we know that by going after clean energy, we need to increase the investment. We need to increase the fixed assets that would in turn add pressure to the tariff rates. Well, whether 8%, which is the current rate, is reasonable, then we need to look at the rising interest rates internationally. And also, generally speaking, internationally, fuel prices are at a high level. Then you can tell whether it is at a reasonable level. I know that if we are to get an agreement that will strike a balance among a basket of interests or factors, it won't be easy. We want to get an agreement. If we can get an agreement that satisfies the ideas that I talked about, then it means that our targets of high reliability, lower emission, and lower carbon levels can be achieved. When the Russian-Ukraine war broke out, the international energy market underwent major fluctuations. Across the world, electricity prices fluctuated and went up drastically. When compared with other cities, we bore a lesser brunt. We have the Tariff Stabilization Fund, and it did play its role. It has been effective in stabilizing the tariff rates. But of course, the SCAs are subject to amendments or modifications. But then before we agree on the changes, as others have said, we need to strike a balance among the factors involved. We can't just change it for the sake of change. Hong Kong is an IFC. Hong Kong is an international innovation and technology center. We have a dense population. We need a safe and reliable supply of electricity. That is of utmost importance. Before we introduce any change, we mustn't sacrifice a reliable supply. In the year 2021, we have the Climate Action Plan 2050. We want to achieve carbon neutrality by the year 2050, 10 years earlier than the national target. We know that there isn't free lunch. There isn't any free green energy in this world. If we want to be conservative when it comes to tariff increases, I think we have no choice but be conservative about our decarbonization targets. At a panel discussion session, I asked the secretary, that is, if we are to reduce the investment of the power companies, would it be feasible and an option for us to extend the target year of carbon neutrality by 10 years, bringing it on a par with the national target year of 2060. But of course, decarbonization, cutting down on carbon emission and cutting down on carbon would be our targets. We know that we can't just stop at shouting slogans. We need to pay a price for that. Mr. Kwok Wai Kam. Thank you, Mr. President. I speak in support of Michael Luk's motion as well as Simon Joey Lee's, Hoey Lee's amendment. Many people have said that when compared with previous years, we are paying much more for our electricity, 20% more for CLP, 45% more for HEC customers. You all know that it is all because of the rising fuel costs, but still it has brought about a public outrage. This is because we can't catch up with the price increases. In today's world, across the board, many sectors are having difficulties in running their business. But the two power companies don't have any risk to bear, and they have a profit guaranteed. It is to the envy of many people. Why is it so? Now, for the two power companies, they had human errors and they had outages, and yet they still got their incentives awarded to them. Let's hope that in the midterm or the interim review of the SCA, there will be appropriate modifications. However, today's focus is on the importation of energy from the mainland so as to suppress the electricity charges. Electricity is a daily necessity, as has been pointed out by many colleagues. Well, you need to switch on your aircon, your fridge, and then your mobile phone, even if you can afford to forget your wallet. And then soon we will be driving electric vehicles. Now, the two companies enjoy a natural monopoly, and as a result of this advantage, they are able to shift the only risk that they're facing to the customers fully, passing it fully to the customers. Well, of course, it is a matter of natural monopoly. And then you will understand that it will be very difficult to find another investor to come to Hong Kong, get a piece of land, and build a generation plant. It is quite impossible. At the same time, we may want to ask this question: is it just because of this we have to bear with it forever so that we allow the two power companies to stay in such a model forever in Hong Kong? There is no risk but high rates of return when they generate and sell electricity to us. Is there an opportunity that we can make use of to change the picture? As the Secretary has said, we are interconnected with the mainland grid. So somehow we are capable to change the picture. But of course, it is a far cry from getting a huge amount or the major part of our electricity supply from the mainland. Well, we are being held ransom. I think the power companies think that we haven't got a fallback position, so they are not going to make concessions. At the end of the day, who are the victims? The general public. Mr. President, when we talk about interconnection, we have to emphasize interconnecting the grids between Hong Kong Island and Kowloon and the New Territories. In the past, the two grids were interconnected, but then there's only when there is an emergency or when it is a matter of rendering support in a supplementary or complementary sense. We need to have better interconnection between HEC and CLP networks. Now, Hong Kong Island customers have to pay much more than our CLP counterparts. Last year, we might be paying $400, $500. Now we pay $700, much more than our counterparts on the other side of the harbor. It is because HEC can only be using fossil fuel to generate electricity. So it is high time for us to make sure that the three cables interconnecting the two companies will be enhanced. And for Chung Kwan O Area 132, we should build the infrastructure as early as possible so that Hong Kong Island customers will have access to cheaper electricity. Mr. President, we are fully behind the plan to achieve carbon neutrality in the year 2050 and reaching the peak in 2030. But of course, it must be affordable to the general public. So I spoke. Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Michael Luk, you may now speak on the amendments. Mr. President, first of all, I'm grateful to Mr. Andrew Lam as well as Mr. Simon Hoey Lee for moving the amendments so that we can cover more issues and more perspectives. For the two amendments, I think there isn't too many differences. However, there is a key difference. Let me talk about the similarities. We all agree that the surging electricity prices add to our burden, adding burden to the businesses, adding burden to our citizens, and our business environment has been adversely affected. Therefore, we all try to find a way to suppress the electricity tariff rates. We are on a common ground in this regard. For Mr. Lee's amendment, I'm grateful to him because he referred us to the publication in 2015 of the public consultation on the future development of the electricity market. Back then, it is said that we should take a look of paragraphs 26 and 27 of Schedule 5 to the SCA. That is, we should make preparations for opening up the power grids for access by new electricity suppliers. So it is a concrete policy objective of opening up the market. The government has already got it written down. As to how that is to be achieved, I think we should try to give suggestions to the government so that we can come up with something which is feasible. And then for Mr. Andrew Lam's amendment, well, he has been emphasizing that we should uphold reliability, safety, and the environmental performance of the two power companies. We share the concern here. We don't want to have frequent blackouts as in the case of the USA after a reform. My family was also affected by the Tuen Mun outage. We had our dinner in the dark. It was romantic, but it isn't something that would like to happen all the time. So when it comes to the reliability and safety of electricity supply and having good environmental performance, I don't think they conflict with lowering the permitted rate of return. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be allowed to make a profit. I'm not asking them to incur a deficit. I'm not saying that they should be made to bear a deficit and then the facilities will be worn and torn and there would be problems. Well, all I'm asking for is that after tax, they are permitted to make a return of 8%. That's too high. I'm grateful to the Secretary for agreeing to go along such a direction. That is, the government will also want to have a lower rate of return. Would like to thank the Secretary for that. Now, Andrew, if you agree that businesses and citizens are suffering as a result of the higher electricity tariff rates, why can't you agree with us so that we make the power companies to bear the social corporate responsibility and lower their rate of return so that our morale would be boosted while we are returning to normalcy. So I can't agree with Andrew Lam, and it will also erode the effectiveness of my original motion. As to the disclosure of information, of course I agree that that shouldn't be done while eroding their commercial bargaining power. I agree with him in that regard. We don't want to be counterproductive. So, colleagues, when you consider my motion, please I don't think you need to worry that by publicizing all the information, the power companies will run into problems, will be disadvantaged when they try to procure reasonably priced fuel. Now, we have openness, we have transparency, but it hasn't put the government in an unfavorable position in procurement matters. So I hope members do need to worry about my original motion as well as the amendment proposed by Simon Lee when it comes to the disclosure of information. So I spoke. Thank you.
Secretary for Environment and Ecology. President, once again, I thank Mr. Michael Luk for his motion, and Mr. Andrew Lam and Dr. Simon Lee for their amendment. I also thank other members for their insightful comments on the motion. Now, in the development of the power market, we've been discussing with the mainland, collaboration with the regions nearby to boost the supply of zero-carbon energy. This will help us stabilize tariff levels. This will also ensure a stable supply and clean energy. CLP imports power through its clean energy transmission system from the Daya Bay nuclear power station and the China Southern Power Grid. The government approved CLP's development plan in 2018. The plan covers enhancing the clean energy transmission system, which will see its power cables replaced to boost the system's capacity. The project is due for completion in 2025. Afterwards, Hong Kong will be able to import more clean energy with greater flexibility. Power from the mainland will make up a greater part of our fuel mix, from 27% now to roughly 35% or so at that point. The central government has always supported our efforts to make greater use of clean energy. This is to cut emissions and improve air quality. The National Energy Administration, or NEA, and the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region government signed a Memorandum of Understanding on Energy Cooperation in 2008 on the long-term supply of the nuclear energy and natural gas to Hong Kong. The Environment and Ecology Bureau is in active talks with the NEA on further boosting the supply of zero-carbon energy to Hong Kong. We do not rule out procuring any kind of zero-carbon energy from the mainland, be it nuclear energy or other renewable energy sources. We will also explore the feasibility of developing zero-carbon project near Hong Kong. When appropriate, we will brief the Legislative Council on those developments. Now, to further boost the capacity of bringing in mainland electricity, the government has also set aside land in Cheung Kwan O Area 132 for electricity facilities. The EFs will be linked with the two power companies' power supply systems to improve their interconnection and transmission capacities. This will help stabilize tariff levels in the long run and also cut emissions from local power plants, benefiting the entire community. This project is still at the initial planning stage and is expected to be commissioned by 2035. At that point, imported zero-carbon energy will make up 60 to 70% of our fuel mix. On renewable energy, the government has been promoting the use of renewable energy, or RE, and we have been providing incentives for power companies to step up their work in this regard. At different buildings, we installed solar panels. We will continue to enhance the work. Today, renewable energy is still on the pricey side of things. So in scaling up the use of renewable energy, we will also bear in mind the implications it may have on tariffs. On opening up the power grid, overseas experience suggests that opening up the power grid is not a guarantee of lower tariffs and more steady supply. We need a steady supply of power for people's lives. The power market involves huge investment and also stable operation. We also need to work with regions nearby. On the long term, whether we should open up the power grid, that process will involve complex considerations. We need to curb vicious competition and also ensure that power companies have enough resources and put them into development, and to keep tariffs at reasonable levels and also provide clean energy to help us achieve the goal of carbon neutrality. Under our current scheme of control agreement, any change proposed to the regulatory framework will not take effect until the current SCAs expire, that is the end of 2033. Internationally, in recent years, there is a trend towards carbon neutrality, and given the rapid pace at which the technology of electricity changes, there will be changes in the power market in the future. So now we need to step up cooperation with regions nearby, ensure stable supply and a safe supply. We will follow the SCAs. We will explore with the power companies at an appropriate time on how the future power market will be regulated and how the market will work on matters such as whether and how to open up the power grid. Now, on places without power distribution system, say places on artificial islands or the northern metropolis, on the question of bringing in new suppliers, we keep an open mind on these matters. But one thing matters. We need to ensure steady, reliable, safe supply, and the tariffs need to be reasonable, and we need to minimize the environmental impact. In picking a supplier, we will make sure we can meet those goals. Now, on permitted returns, under the current scheme of control agreements, the permitted returns went down from 13.5% to 9.99%. Under the current SCAs, it has been lowered further to 8%. Still, the government keeps an open mind about the interim review. We do not limit ourselves on what we will be reviewing. Now, the review will be based on the current SCAs, which will remain in force until 2033. Any change to the SCAs will require the agreement of the government and the two power companies before they take effect. Now, based on stakeholders' views, in this interim review, we will propose lowering the permitted rate of returns further to ease the pressure on rising tariffs. The SCAs also provide for a customer performance penalty and incentive system covering a number of things, restoration of power, reliability, etc. Last year, CLP saw an incident with the cable bridge, and then 2 months ago, Hong Kong Electric also had an outage. The penalty and incentive system is flawed. So our plan is to make it an emphasis to review the penalty mechanism in the interim review to boost the reliability of power supply. Now, also on the indicators about the power of restoration power supply, such that human-induced error will not be a cause for incentive and also penalties for large outages. On fuel costs, there's a cost pass-through mechanism for power companies to recover the fuel costs from people. There's a fuel cost adjustment account. The difference is reflected in that account. Power companies get to charge customers for rising fuel costs or give them back through rebates. There's a monthly adjustment mechanism. This will help reflect the changing fuel costs. The government is aware that there are shortcomings under the current system. When energy prices soar, the power companies will pass on the costs on to customers. The government believes the two power companies need to show the greater social responsibility by stabilizing tariffs, and that means bringing in a mechanism to share the fuel costs. That way, when an energy crisis strikes, the power companies can ride out the tough times together with the people. Now, we will, in this review, explore a cost-sharing system. Again, this mechanism will need the agreement of the two power companies before it can be implemented. Under the SCAs, the government will ask the companies to do what they can to stabilize the tariffs to minimize the impact of rising energy costs. On transparency, the current SCAs cover in an electronic information booklet available to the public. It sets out tariff, safety, environmental management, and the promotion of renewable energy, energy efficiency, and saving. Also included are the power companies' operating expenditures and financial statements, such as the costs of power generation and non-power generation systems, and also the adjustment mechanism of fuel clause charges and fuel mix. Through this interim review, we will ask the power companies to be more transparent with their financial statements. This means explaining how fuel costs and the FCRA work, the detailed operating expenditures, performance, and earnings under the incentive and penalty mechanism. These steps will enhance the power companies' accountability. We will also talk to the power companies about whether they can disclose more operational details, such as the criteria for picking fuel suppliers and whether disclosures can be made more often. On financial oversight, we propose stricter oversight of power companies' expenditures, assets, and investments. This includes better accounting practices, such as reviewing the criteria for putting operating expenditure under fixed assets and maximum interest rates borne by the power companies for their loans, a review of the life cycle of various fixed assets, a requirement for power companies to obtain the government's prior approval for the transaction or development of fixed assets, such as land, and to share the profits with users. Now, on the 5-year development plans, Hong Kong is an international financial center and aviation hub. Stable power supply is crucial. The government will continue to monitor the power company's 5-year development plans, including the proposed capital project to avoid excessive, premature, unnecessary, or irrational investments. This is to ensure stable power supply and environmental performance, while also meeting the goal of lower tariffs through optimizing resource allocation and boosting the efficiency of power supply networks. President, the government keeps an open mind about the interim review. Now, we are not setting any limits on the scope of the review. The government notes members' comments and will carefully study the great comments members have made, and we will also raise these points with the power companies for discussion. After the review is done, the government will report the findings when appropriate. President, I so submit.
I call upon Mr. Andrew Lam to move an amendment. President, I move my amendment. I propose the question to you that I propose the question to you that Mr. Dennis Leung claims the division bell will rung for 5 minutes. Voting begins. Please check your vote. If there is no question, voting is closed. Please display the results. Election Committee, 36 present, 13 for, 9 against, 14 abstention. Functional and Geographical Constituencies, 45 present, 6 for, 25 against, 13 abstention. The question is not agreed by a majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment negatived. Ms. Dari Lee. President, I move that in the event of further divisions being claimed at this meeting in respect of the motion on importing electricity from the mainland to stabilize electricity tariffs in Hong Kong and the amendments, this Council shall proceed forthwith to the division after the division bell has been rung for 1 minute. I now propose the question to you that Ms. Dari Lee's motion moved by Ms. Dari Lee be passed. I think the question is agreed by a majority of each of the two groups of members present. The motion is passed. Now, the Council shall proceed forthwith to the division after the division bell has been rung for 1 minute. Dr. Simon Lee, please move your amendments. President, I move my amendments. I propose the question to you that Dr. Simon Lee's amendment be passed. Mr. Tom E. Cheung claims the division. The division bell will be rung for 1 minute. Please check your votes. If there is no question, voting is closed. Please display the results. Election Committee, 36 present, 24, 0 against, 16 abstentions. Functional and Geographical Constituencies, 45 present, 35 for, 0 against, 9 abstentions. The question is agreed by a majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. Michael Luk, you still have 1 minute, 45 seconds to reply, then the debate will come to a close. Thank you, President. I thank 33 members for speaking in the motion debate and also for the Secretary's reply to the suggestions made in the original motion and the amendments. The government pledges to more proactively introduce electricity supply from the mainland, open up the electricity grid to introduce competition. And also concerning the review of the SCA, concerning the permitted rates of profits, and also the review mechanism, there will be further review. Now, this is a non-binding motion, but this is very influential in that it influences more than the government's policy-making process. Now, the interim review is a review requiring consensus between the government and the two power companies. Now, many members mentioned about the corporate social responsibility of the power companies. So I hope the two power companies can really take this perspective and reduce the rates of permitted profits and also adjust the mechanism on tariff. Now, there have been a lot of valuable views put forward. The FTU will continue to advocate for enhancements of the electricity policy so that citizens can enjoy energy at a reasonable price. Now, I put the question to you that Mr. Michael Luk's motion, as amended by Mr. Andrew Lam be passed. Mr. Tommy Chang claims a division. The division bell will be rung for 1 minute. Voting begins. Please check your votes. If there is no question, voting is closed. Display the results, please. Election Committee, 36 present, 21 against, 21 for, 0 against, 15 abstentions. Functional and Geographical Constituencies, 45 present, 34 for, 0 against, 10 abstentions. The question is agreed by majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the motion as amended. Passed.
Members' motion with no legislative effect. Professor